Hello. This is the first passage I'm going to read from my book for this website. And here's the book. This is, I think, the only passage within the book that is actually taken from an event that's in the Gospels themselves. It's about the raising of Lazarus, and I just could not resist trying to reimagine that in my own language. So here's the passage. I hope you'll just sit back and relax and enjoy it. Thank you. It's called A Dead Man Lives. With my own eyes, I saw dead flesh, shaped in the form of a man, 4 days in a tomb, stinking with corruption, made quick again with life. Dead flesh that rose up to its feet supple, and again walked among us. I saw this but once, which sufficeth my soul for all time. That man was named Lazarus. He was a friend of Jesus, and much beloved by him. His dead flesh was wrapped in a shroud and entombed, and that tomb shut then, with a stone of great weight. When told of his death, Jesus wept, hot tears, a sudden cloudburst. This was a thing that none had ever seen, and it cast all who stood there into silence. Jesus inquired then whither was this tomb, and hasting there, thronged by many, had 6 men set aside that stone, which was done with much heaving. Into that tomb's black mouth then went Jesus, and he stayed in there for long moments. From that tomb's black mouth then emerged Lazarus, 4 days dead, on his 2 legs standing, swathed in the shroud cloth, which from his head and 4 limbs hung down to the dust. Forward he then stepped into the sun's light, his face a waxen mask, his eyes lost in dark sockets. He stood thus for long moments, seeming dead and seeming alive in unclear measure. A frown of confusion furrowed his brow, and his face bore an expression strange, both distant and grave. His 2 eyes then opened, and in them could be seen thoughts passing by like clouds, thoughts that whispered to him, saying he was one Lazarus, a man who once lived. For yea, the dead Lazarus was alive. The throng swarmed him, astonished, and led him to a rock on which to sit. But he would not sit, and set out forthwith. And with step faltering but straight, the shroud cloth straggling behind him, he set out for the home where he had long lived and had also died. Jesus then said this to the assembled throng, See ye how this body that ye call Lazarus, that was in corruption, doth now live? But I tell ye plainly that this body's life is just seeming. For whosoever trusts in their flesh and not the Spirit of God, that is thy true self, is dead already, but knows this not. Turn ye from thy humanhood, that in truth is much seemingness, miscalled life. Know the Spirit of God that lives in thee, and as thee, and is thee, for that is life. Turn ye and live this truth, that is not of this flesh, but yet lives here, in this world. This marvel I saw happen. 100 more saw the same, and this was but one of a host of such acts that were beyond belief, and seen by thousands. As many as did see this marvel, and believed what their eyes saw, as many saw, but believed not what they saw. And these were impelled then to perverse explication. And like angry wasps, these stung then with malignance the ears of those who hated him in the temple. And those who hated him said this, that he breaketh the law, though they spake not of what marvels this breaking consisted. That he is a menace to the Jewish people, people who thronged him with love in many places. In the temple's high chambers they designed then to seize him, whereupon Jesus withdrew us into the wild, nigh the city of Ephraim. That night none had tongue to eat or to speak. The sight of Lazarus at that tomb's black mouth redounded interior to each man with sober force. And the sight of Jesus, that same day seen to weep, lay strange and heavy upon each heart. We sat long past eventide by a low fire, by our silence oppressed. Jesus broke that silence then, saying into the fire this, in a manner mixed, severe and yet sweet. See ye how what ye call Lazarus departed from the flesh, then that same one returned to it? Each one of ye is the same kind. Ye too are but spirits. And I shall tell ye this same thing forever, whilst I am among ye. Our silence now changed. One dared to speak what none dared give tongue to. My Lord, began one among us, today, when ye wept for Lazarus, whom thou did love, and Jesus turned his face to that one's face, which brought swift halt to his utterance. And with his gaze, Jesus swept our band entire, who returned that gaze with lowered eye, and none dared to speak. Think ye then that I wept then for Lazarus? Of this all felt sure, and yet none dared to speak. Jesus lowered his head, and his face was mournful, as we had never before seen. And he stayed thus for long moments, and then he upraised his head and said this, My dearest friends, ye who most love me, ye who stand with me, I pray thee, know thee this, I wept not for Lazarus. Nay, I wept for ye all. And with one sweep of his arm, he took in our small band, and with a second sweep of his arm, all mankind and all womankind beyond us. And one tear crept down his cheek, slowly. Then he retired to the crest of a nearby hill, where by himself he prayed, faced in another direction until the dawn. Thank you. Thank you for listening.